What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Money Down Pod. I'm Kayvon Izami alongside my guy, Sean White. You can follow us on Twitter at Money Down Pod on Twitter. Sean White at Dumpster Fire Fan. Myself at Kayvon_sports. It's a college football Wednesday as we talk some head coaches either out the door with a big paycheck, I must add, or on the hot seat and could be out the door any minute now. Herm Edwards, we've all heard what happened with Lane Kiffin on the tarmac. When Herm Edwards got the field hired, man. I mean, he got hugged on the field by the AD and the president. Those are his friends, by the way, if you guys don't know the situation down in Arizona State. And that was rough. That was rough. But that was a long time coming. I was shocked that they even brought him back for this season. But you can't lose to Eastern Michigan at home, being 20-plus point favorites and expect to keep your job there. Brian Harsin, based off every single thing that happened on Saturday night, is basically out. I think that they will give him till the Georgia game and then fire him, in my personal opinion, but wouldn't be shocked if we got news by next Sunday if he's out too. Nebraska, we all know what happened there. Scott Frost is out. That's a really interesting situation there. And then we want to talk about what's going on down in Jackson State, because I think that's something we have to watch. And Sean, I want to start there, man, because what Deion Sanders is doing down in Jackson State is, I think, one of the most fascinating storylines in all of college football. And I think it has now become even more fascinating because of what his son is doing. We all know what his son did last year as a freshman. He finished the year incredible. He won the Jerry Rice Award for the Jerry Rice Award for the most outstanding freshman, I think it is. He was phenomenal towards the end of last year. Then he started out this year on a tear. I think his completion percentage has jumped all the way up to 71%, 10 touchdowns, 0 interception. The offense is completely humming. They will not lose a game this year because their hardest competition was FAMU, and they already took care of him till they get to the Celebration Bowl. With what he's doing last year and what Deion has done, and by the way, now this year they have their best offensive line since Deion's been there. Deion said all offseason it's a focus to get bigger in the trenches. They've got their best offensive line, which helps Shadeur out because Shadeur was under rest 24/7 last year. They couldn't run the ball. This year they're running the ball. This year he has time to throw the ball. And when you put all that together and the fact that they're going to go undefeated, I think that there is going to be a ton of questions around college football, and I want to get in front of it and say it on this show first. People are going to say, is Deion Sanders and Shadeur Sanders a package deal for a high-end FBS school? That is going to be the rumor all offseason. I guarantee it. Now, unfortunately for us that love the drama, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Deion has some very, very intense feeling towards HBCU schools, which is awesome, by the way. And I think he feels it's his job to build up the HBC schools and create them into some powerhouse league, which he's doing. And because of that, I don't think he would take it. But I do think Shadeur Sanders would be willing to transfer. And I think if Shadeur is willing to transfer, I think maybe Deion would be willing to go with his son. And I think one of the first places we would look at is Auburn. Deion wanted the Auburn job, and they said no to him before he got the Jackson State job. And now it's that old song, you wanted me, you didn't want me then, but now that I'm hot, you want me? And so Deion in his ego might say that and say, no, I'm good. But he wanted that job. He wanted it. And I think Shadeur would love to go play at Auburn. But I don't know if he will, but I think we should watch that out. Because I think if Shadeur is willing to leave, then maybe Deion is willing to go with him. If Shadeur is not, then Deion's staying, and Deion is staying for a long time at Jackson State. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually agree with you. Before we started the show, you were like, we need to talk about Jackson State. And I was like, did I miss something? Did something happen with Jackson State? And you're like, you'll see, we'll talk about it. So you're talking about the performance level and everything like that, which I completely agree with. And seeing that, I was like, dang, did something happen over there? Did Deion say something like he might leave or something? But I got you now. And I completely agree. I think they would be a package deal for most places. The one thing that I would say, I would 100% say that's true if Florida State was out there losing right now. I think that
Yeah, that's out.
Norvell kind of saved his career right there
Yeah,
because it was going to be trouble because Deion was circling that job kind of if they'd have started out a little rough, and
yeah.
all the boosters and ads would have been all over that. So you kind of pitted Auburn there. I agree. I think Auburn's in play. Outside of Auburn, I don't really see another place coming available that Deion might would go to.
Me
But
too.
you're right; it would be a package deal situation because Shadeur can play quarterback. He can
He's
play it
pro.
all.
He's going pro. He will go
Yeah.
pro.
And I do think that that might be one thing that might hold that back a little bit. Is I do believe Deion and maybe Shadeur a little bit as well would kind of like to have that notoriety of being a HBCU
I
quarterback
think so
drafted
too.
into the league like that, and it may keep it going. But my God, with the transfer portal the way it is, with how NIL is, if Dion was to land a Power Five job, he'd be bringing a ton of top recruits with him from Jackson State, along with a lot of ones coming into the school from high school.
Yeah.
Whoever does make the plunge and hire Dion, and a lot of these schools just have unlimited money anyway.
Mhm.
They can throw whatever they want at him, and he might would just take a Godfather offer. But wherever he ends up going, that team's going to turn around quickly because he's going to have the recruiting base, and he obviously has a solid stable of NFL players that are now coaches coaching with him. That I think he would take with him too. It's just would he like to leave that HBCU? That would be the one thing tugging at him. But money does talk when it comes to college football, so it wouldn't shock me if someone like a Auburn, who's willing to just pay whatever Brian Harson's fee to get him to leave, would
Yeah.
be. I mean, are they still paying Gus Malzahn too?
They're still paying Gus Malzahn. Yep.
I don't think money is an issue in Auburn. So that's
No.
one of the places that I would look at, like you were saying, that would look to package a deal together because their quarterback situation in Auburn, let's be honest,
It's
that's pretty
terrible.
rough. Still playing Finley out there, that was kind of strange. I don't understand what's going on at Auburn at all. We talked about it in the offseason when all the Harson drama started. We thought he was going to get fired anyway then.
Mhm.
Now he's carried on into the season. I think you're right. I think he gets fired after Georgia. After Georgia probably body bags him by about 60 in one game. That's what I think happens too. Deion's the one to watch. I'm glad you got out in front of that.
Yeah, again, I don't think Deion will take it because again, Deion's ego is huge and rightfully so. And I said Deion wanted the job for Auburn. It was all out there, and Auburn wasn't willing to take the leap. I don't know if Deion would. I think Deion would more be willing to stick his finger out the middle and say no. But people do a lot of things for their kids, man. And if Shadeur wants to do something, that's the key here. That's the big key here. But I think your point is really, really well taken. Is kind of back to what I said at the beginning. I think Deion has a very soft spot for this HBCU thing, and rightfully so. And I think Shadeur is kind of taking that on too. And I think that it would be important to them to have that representation going to the NFL. Let's talk about Shadeur in the NFL. He's a little undersized. He's 6'2". I get that. He's listed as 6'2" at least. But dude, he's accurate. He's quick. He can move outside the pocket. His accuracy has gotten better every single year. And no disrespect to Jackson State, he's not playing with the greatest receivers out there. All right, this year he has a great offensive line. Last year was terrible. What are you seeing on tape that talks to you about Shadeur Sanders in the NFL? Because what I see is NFL ready, soon to
Yeah,
be NFL ready.
agree. And size comp wise, he's kind of a poor man's Caleb Williams, and they're going to come out in that same draft. That's how I kind of feel. He's going to be a little smaller than Caleb, I think, even though they're listed at the same size.
Yeah,
But they kind of have a runaround game, and they're both deadly accurate on the throw. I like their rollout game. I like all of that. I think they have high athleticism too. Caleb just plays with Lincoln Riley with a
yeah,
system in USC, which I mean, that's going to get him drafted number one in general after Kyler and Baker and all that. So he's in that Caleb Williams mold. And if you don't get a Caleb Williams, that's kind of the same offense and prospect type you're looking at there. But he's doing it at HBCU level. And this also has got to be stated too when it comes to the affection that Deion feels for HBCUs. It's not just Jackson State. It's all of the HBCUs
yes,
in general. And
yes.
what he's doing at Jackson State is not only getting Shadeur scouted and getting the number one recruit at corner in the country and getting scouts down there to look at them. When those scouts do come down to the Jackson State games, they don't just focus on that. They also get to see the other team and see
Great
if any
point.
players flash like that. So he's getting other HBCU athletes drafted at this point just by scouts actually being there and having a broad general's taste. Because a lot of times back in the day, there wasn't top tier NFL scouts heading out there. Your top area scout wasn't heading to HBCUs. They're going to go see Georgia. They're going to go see Ole Miss play.
Mhm.
They're not going to go do that. Now you're getting the exposure out there. So I think Shadeur Sanders is going to be one of the first big time HBCU players drafted higher in a draft, where it's going to be a big story on ESPN during draft day. And I think that's going to be something that might keep him there as well. I do think he's an NFL quarterback. That's for sure from what I've seen on tape.
I agree completely. It's a great point about the HBCU. Let's move on to Arizona State here, Sean. Arizona State, in my opinion, really dropped the ball hard these past couple years. And what I mean by that is this: Arizona, for the last couple years, has been a complete and utter mess. They have been a disaster for a pretty good while. And ASU had every chance in the world to take control of that state, to really take a stranglehold of that state. And they dropped the ball. And now, if you look at what's happening, Arizona has made a phenomenal hire in Jedd Fisch, which I said from the beginning. I have loved that guy. I told you guys preseason, take the over on Arizona's win total, and they are already one win away from getting over that over total. So what I love Arizona is doing big time. Jedd Fisch is showing that he has footprints all over the Arizona high schools. The players talk highly of him. You see former alumni coming back like Teddy Bruschi and all these guys talking about Jedd Fisch. There's a lot going on in Arizona now, while Arizona State is looking with their shoes off, their pants off, saying, what the hell has happened? And the question to me becomes this. I know you have some candidates that you want to talk about. I have some candidates that I want to talk about. But the first question to me is this a good job? Like, if we sit back in college football, do we say this is a good job? I don't know the donor situation over there. I usually have a good handle on a lot of these programs' donor situation, especially since NIL is getting going. I like to look into that stuff. I do know Herm Edwards was very, very public about his staff being annoyed that the donors haven't created a good NIL collective yet. I don't know if that has changed. I don't know if maybe they just didn't want to create one because they didn't like Herm, and now they'll create one. I'm not sure. But they've got to get that under control. In terms of Arizona State is a good job, I actually think it can be a good job, man. I think people like the state of Arizona. I think that, yes, the Pac-12 is in big question with college football realignment, but I think with the 12-team playoff, Sean, I think that helps the Arizonas, the Arizona States, the Utahs of the world, the Washingtons of the world right now, because that gives more time, because now more teams can make the playoff before we go into all crazy mode of realignment. So I actually think it can be a good job if they get the right guy here. They've got to get the right guy here. Before I give out some of the names that I think they should look at, what do you just think about the job of Arizona State in itself?
I think if they hire the right guy, it's a sleeping giant that could honestly be out there in the playoff competing year in and year out. Because even though Washington and Oregon are still there, technically, you don't know if they're going to move. They're two of the more movable pieces out there.
Mm-hmm.
You worry about that a little bit. But honestly, if you're going by recruiting base, they have a better recruiting base than Washington and Oregon really does when it comes to high school players in the state.
Yes.
You keep some of that hometown talent. You got USC and UCLA moving out. You have an opportunity to seize that power vacuum out there in the Pac-12, and they could be a real-time contender. But they need the right guy, and obviously they need the donors to fork out some money, which is something that me and you aren't sure about. You would think they would have a decent amount of NIL deals, because Arizona and Arizona State, that whole economy in Arizona has graduated a lot of people.
Yes.
And a lot of top guys do move out to California and make tons of money that still have Arizona State into their hearts and love the school. So you would think they would be more willing to fork over some money if it's not Herm, because Herm had been there a sneaky good amount of time, and it just hadn't been the right amount of competing going on. So I do see the NIL budget getting bumped up a little bit, because I do think they probably have money. It's just I don't know who their top 2 or 3 donors would be, where a lot of these other schools, when you're trying to fire somebody, the top 1, 2, or 3 is just like, fuck it, I'll eat the millions, just get rid of the guy. So I don't know where they're at on that level, but I do have one coach in mind that I think would turn them around. I want to hear okay, you want to hear mine?
Yeah.
It's like Dan Patrick said, if Urban goes there, I think they're a contender. Dan Patrick for the week has been saying Urban Meyer's one to watch for Arizona State. Said it before the season, said it after. I think that's actually a sneaky decent play for Urban. If you watch Urban and where he goes into places, he always goes into them when they're almost at their lowest. And when the time is perfect after that, he dipped out of Florida, went into Ohio State with the sanctions, and then built that program up. And then he would be able to go to Arizona State. Excuse me, right now build the program up for a year or two. USC and UCLA gets out of there. He's there to take that power vacuum. That's an Urban Meyer type move. I know a lot of people talk Nebraska, and you might have him thrown out there for Nebraska as well. And we can debate that. I don't see him wanting to go against Ryan Day and Ohio State all the time. I don't really see that part of it, but we can debate that a little later. I think Arizona State's the spot for Urban. I think Arizona State should go big game hunting and go after him as well.
So I don't have him for Nebraska. I don't think Nebraska. I don't think there's any shot that Urban takes Nebraska's job. And I don't even think it's because of Ryan Day. I just don't think Urban wants to be in Nebraska. And that's no disrespect to Nebraska. I just don't think Urban is in that lifestyle. The one thing that would maybe make Urban want to take that job is that everybody and their mother has been terrible there. And Urban has this ego that's like, watch me go to Nebraska and pull this baby out. That's the one thing. I hate to say this because I love Arizona State and I don't want to disrespect, and I don't mean disrespect. I think that Arizona State is beneath Urban. I think it's beneath him. I think Urban looks down on an Arizona State program. I hate to say that. And again, I no disrespect to you Arizona State fans out there. I think he should take it. I think that would be awesome. If I'm in Urban's head and if I'm reading Urban's head right, I think he looks down on a program like Arizona State. That's just my full opinion on it. I could be wrong.
Okay, well, let me throw this then. If he looks down on Arizona State, but he can't take Nebraska because Nebraska is just the place and everything, before we continue on with these two, where would you see Urban going in the next 2 or 3 years? What schools would be on Urban's list in your head?
I don't know, man. I really don't know.
Because I think he'd obviously take Notre Dame, but I don't think Notre Dame would take him at this point.
I don't think Notre Dame would take him. I think he would love to take Notre Dame. I think the only way Notre Dame would take Urban is if Marcus Freeman really falls on his face and Notre Dame just goes terrible. And they're like, man, we've got to get someone in here to fix us up ASAP. I think that's the only way Notre Dame. But you're right. Notre Dame with their traditions and stuff like that. You know, the one fascinating thing about Arizona State that I just thought about while you were talking is, again, no disrespect to Arizona State. It is a school that you can get kids in and not really have to worry about academics too much. Yeah. You know, they call it like the party school of the West, kind of like ECU of the East. You go out there and you have which is awesome. Arizona State's amazing. I love that type of school. So Urban kind of likes that. He doesn't want to have to deal with this academics and punishing kids and all this stuff. He doesn't care for any of that stuff. So that's the one thing that's intriguing. But dude, the Urban question's fascinating because usually you look around, you see jobs. This is the one. Would he take Auburn? Would Urban go to Auburn?
Would
Urban be willing to go head-to-head?
Okay. Do you think Auburn is going to be desperate enough to do that?
I think Auburn would jump at Urban.
I believe that as well because Auburn, I think, is a desperate program in my opinion.
But I think Auburn would. I think their donors, which are so hungry to win, would make sure they could get Urban if Urban wants it.
But does Urban want to go and play Saban every year?
I don't know about that, but I think Auburn could be interesting.
Because I think wherever Urban goes next, Urban knows in his head he's got to win. Because that situation in Jacksonville, it did ding his legacy a little bit, his coaching wise. I mean, kicking kickers, it was the off the field stuff. If he'd have just lost normally and got fired, that'd have been one thing. He lost and got embarrassed character wise. So that's something that I think Urban's going to want to try to change around. So that's an interesting point. That's why I wanted to ask you because I think Arizona State would be fine, but you're right. Maybe he looks down on that. I don't buy Nebraska at all. Let me hear your Arizona State candidates then, because he's my number one candidate. But you're right; he could just turn that down. So let me hear who you have out there.
Yeah, I think that he we'll see. I think he looks down at. I think my number one candidate would be Dan Mullen. I think Dan Mullen. A lot of people look at Dan Mullen like he failed at Florida. He failed at Florida because he couldn't recruit to the way that they wanted it. When it came to actually X's and O's and what he did at Florida, he had them in the SEC championship a couple years in a row, back to back. And that's with him not doing a great job recruiting. You put him out in a place like Arizona State, which, by the way, this stuff matters. They've been running a defensive-minded head coach for the last couple years. It's time to get some fun up in there. It's time to sell some tickets. Dan Mullen will come in there and bring some fun. Dan Mullen will come in there and sell some offense. I think Dan Mullen would be really fun in the Arizona State offense. That's my first one. The next one, I would look at Tom Herman. I know a lot of people, Tom Herman failed at Texas. I get it. Who hasn't failed at Texas? Who has not failed at Texas? Before Tom Herman failed at Texas, he was looking like the golden child of college football. Everyone loved him, and he did a decent job at Texas, but everyone has failed at Texas. And then the other one, which people, it's not a sexy name, but you have to look at this guy with what he's doing at Kansas. Lance Leipold should be in consideration for Nebraska, for Arizona State. Lance Leipold should be in consideration for every single job that is open right now for what that man is doing at Kansas. 3-0, taking players that he hasn't even fully recruited yet. He should be the number one candidate for a lot of schools. It's not sexy. People don't love it, but he's a great head coach. But my number one guy is Dan Mullen. I think Arizona State and Dan Mullen would be a great match.
So you took the words out of my mouth for Leipold, and he's one of the ones that I have down for Nebraska. He's got to get a bigger job soon. You can't go into Kansas and just dominate like that over the first 3 games and turn around literally the worst Power 5 program over the last 10 years, maybe of all time.
Crazy.
They were horrible. I can't believe it. I mean, their over-under was like, what, a game and a half this year?
Yes, literally.
So, yeah. So, he's done wonders with Kansas. Any job opening that goes and hires him, I can't fault him at all. He's a solid candidate. Next up, Tom Herman was one of mine. He was number 2 behind Urban. I just think the offense that he runs would fit Arizona State well. That's just my feeling on that. I like the offensive mind there, like you were saying. The one problem I have with Dan Mullen, and this he would be solid, but here's my one issue. He's such an SEC guy, man.
It's true.
He's all about that grit, that run the ball with multiple running backs, and just it's something about
– It's a fair point.
It's something about Dan that just screams SEC Big Ten to me that just doesn't scream Pac-12 Big 12, in my opinion. And that's why I would hold off a little on Dan. But I like Urban, Tom, and then obviously anywhere Leipold goes, I'm going to be a fan because what he's done at Kansas is crazy.
And let me just throw out one more name, and just because of what he's doing at Georgia, offensive coordinator Todd Monken, what he's doing at Georgia, you're going to start hearing his name you're going to hear his name getting thrown around a lot. I just want to throw that out there for the listeners to keep your ears open on that name because he is going to start getting some serious consideration. But Sean, to wrap this segment up, I hope you're right. I want to see Urban in Arizona State. I want to see Urban back on the sideline. Look, all this stuff about him coaching, being on the pregame show, all that stuff. I want to see him on the sideline. That's fun for him.
Imagine he goes to coaches, takes Tom Herman with him. Just both of them.
The amount of stuff the amount of reporters that'd be watching the strip clubs out there to see what happens with those two. All right, let's move on here to Nebraska. Look, Nebraska's in a situation now where we just what else can you say, man? You everybody and their mother thought you have our son, our guy Scott Frost. Things will finally work. And then look what has happened. It hasn't worked. Sean, where do they go from here, man? What do they do? I told you, like I said, Lance Leipold, I think is a great person for Nebraska. I think he's a phenomenal. I think Urban's great, but I am telling you right now, I would be shocked out of my mind if Urban takes the job at Nebraska. Where the heck, in your opinion, does Nebraska go from here?
Yeah, obviously Lance Leipold's a top candidate, like we've talked about, but we'll skip over that. A dark horse one I've seen thrown around that I actually like and would have came up with. I kind of like Bill O'Brien there.
It's a good one. That's interesting.
Finally getting out of that Saban offensive coordinator spot, and just judging off the NFL last few years, he isn't getting an NFL job. That's just the case. He's not going to be able to make it back to the NFL unless he takes a coordinator job. And really, no one wants to hire him as that except for Belichick. And Belichick didn't want to hire him there because he's scared he's going to jump to be a head coach. So I don't see any really openings in the NFL for Bill O'Brien. So I think it's time for him to start focusing on those top college jobs again. And, he turned around Penn State during a down, terrible era right there that Penn State went through. I kind of could see him going into Nebraska, just being a different guy that's not from there and just really trying to turn that program around. He's already won in the Big Ten. I kind of could see Bill O'Brien kind of being that guy that's kind of had the experience, go through, really try to raise up a program that, let's be honest, is down. Nebraska's overrated, dude. Like that's just what it is. The fans overrate them because they sell out the arena every game or whatever. I'm sorry, you're not a good team. You haven't been for years. It's not the Tom Osborne era. You're not good anymore.
Yeah.
You're going to have a major rebuild. They do have the money backing. I think they need to get somebody like Bill O'Brien, like a Lance Leipold in there. Give him some time, a few years, and really try to change the program into a different direction. That's going to be a tough sell, though. I just don't know if Nebraska ever gets back to being Nebraska, if you know what I mean, or even being super competitive in that matter. The recruiting disadvantage there is just too immense, especially with everyone paying people now.
It really is. The only positive that Nebraska has is that they're in the Big Ten and that this new TV deal is going to give them an absurd amount of money to be able to go pay a top big head coach if they want it. But other than that, I'm with you. It's really hard. Look, Matt Rule is a candidate. Like Matt Rule could be out by October. I mean, in the Panthers, would he be willing to go to Nebraska? I mean, he's done a phenomenal job at Temple. Like he did great things at Baylor. Would Matt Rule want to go to Nebraska? I think that could be fascinating. I don't know. Matt Rule at Arizona State could be fascinating, you know, but Matt Rule is someone that I think you definitely will have to watch for. Lance Leipold, I told you, is one of the big guys that I was looking at if they really wanted to go down that road. Another one that I had written down here was, like, I don't know if this guy would want to leave Kansas State because he loves it, but what Chris Kleiman has done at Kansas State just for the years past, he's very consistent. Again, I don't think Nebraska fans would love that hire because it's not very sexy. You've heard Matt Campbell. Why would Matt Campbell want to leave Iowa State? He has a good thing going at Iowa State. I don't understand why he wants to. And then one name that really Nebraska fans won't love because it's just not a sexy name. But listen, Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina, his mullet and his everything he's doing there, he's going to get a big-time head coaching job eventually. Maybe Nebraska goes after him. Who knows? But that's another guy to watch farther on. But I think the top candidate in Nebraska, other than Urban, should be Lance Leipold and Matt Rule.
Yeah, I agree with Matt Rule. I actually have Matt Rule leaning more toward Auburn. You actually said two of them that I kind of like toward Auburn.
Oh, wow.
With Matt Rule and Jamie Chadwell. I actually like Chadwell to Auburn too if they can.
Yo, I would love Chadwell to Auburn. That would be fun.
I think if they're going to go the unproven guy at a smaller school, I think he would be the good choice for Auburn, in my opinion. But I actually have Matt Rule as an Auburn guy as well because Auburn's going to swing big. I don't care who it is. They're going to swing big. They're either going to get a top small school guy or they're going to get one of the proven head coaches that everyone has out on the market. They're going to pay a lot of money for him too. Back in Nebraska on that, you're going to have to settle for someone mid-tier, honestly, and just hope they can bring you back up. Because I'm telling you, Nebraska, the fans overrate them at a same level that Texas and Tennessee and USC has been doing that for the last few years. We're almost at the Florida level of that too. Like, I mean, it's one of those schools where they just think they are something that they're not. And it's a real issue, in my opinion. And when they're trying to sign these coaches, because they're just going to be disappointed in the end. So they need to go out and just hit a double, man. That's why I said Bill O'Brien. Hit a double. Get someone that's just going to adult, that's solid. Go out there and do that. You want to talk about Auburn? Because I already said Matt Rule a little bit, Jamie Chadwell I like. Do you have any other ones? Urban, you mentioned. Auburn's going to be a big one, man, because Auburn loves to think they're Alabama, but they beat them every now and then. But it's a tough place to coach.
Yeah, Auburn's fascinating, man. I understand they still have a coach there, but he's gone. The writing's on the wall. Brian Harson's gone. By the way, I like Brian Harsin. I feel bad for him. I think it just hasn't worked out there. I think Brian Harsin, it's going to sound crazy, could be a candidate for the Arizona State job once he gets fired. Because he did a hell of a job at Boise State. Like, I would just watch out for his name. For Auburn, man, like I said, Urban would be the person I would circle the most. And I think Urban would be intrigued by that job. I don't know if it happens. I like your idea of Matt Rule at Auburn. I really like your sneaky one of Jamie Chadwell. I think that could be fascinating. I just wonder about this with Jamie Chadwell. No offense to the boosters and everyone at Auburn. They're snobs. They want a big name guy. I don't know if they would love the idea of bringing in someone like Jamie Chadwell. But to be fully honest, Sean, I have a really hard time coming up with someone for Auburn because of the way they run this program, man. You just don't know how to predict where to go. That's why whenever I think of Auburn, all I can think of is big names. All I can think of is Deion Sanders, Urban Meyer, Matt Rule, just massive names because of the way they run this program. Everything to them is we've got to get a big name. We've got to hit a home run guy. And if they don't, something like this happens with Brian Harsin. After 1 year, they hate the guy and they want him out. That's why all I can think of big names. Do you have any other like low-key guys that you think of? Because I just can't see it.
Yeah, unless they want to go with Todd Monken, like we mentioned, and just go with a SEC coordinator in there, like it just make sure you got an SEC guy. That would be one way you could go. I would have thought Dan Lanning would have been kind of perfect for them if he had went to Oregon, but that's too little, too late. I thought if they'd have fired him in time, that would have been a good person to look at. I don't think Saban has any coordinators outside of Bill O'Brien, and they aren't taking Bill O'Brien. That's not going to be a Bill O'Brien landing spot. And to be honest, unless they can pull Lane from Ole Miss, that's the only other real like one that you would watch for. But at the same time, Lane's kind of got it rolling in Ole Miss, and I really wouldn't want to take that. That was another I was going to mention. If for some reason something happened to Leach, I would love him at Arizona State.
Oh, Mike Leach at Arizona State? Yeah. Oh, that would be awesome.
He got fired at Mississippi State. I think him in Arizona State would be perfect. But I don't think he's going to get fired this year. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
What about Hugh Freeze? He's already shown he can win at an SEC level, not at the top tier, but he beat Alabama, he beat Nick Saban a couple times. He comes with a lot of baggage, which Auburn doesn't really care about.
What about if you're going to go the baggage way, just throw extra millions at Urban. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking on that. Like, that's the only issue there. I think Hugh Freeze is going to have to take a smaller job, to be honest, just to start with. But he's definitely proven, but I think he's going to have to go and take another smaller Power 5 job and then move his way back up. I do like the guy at Wake Forest that I'm blanking on his name right now, too.
Dave Clawson.
Yes, Clawson, but they're not going to take Clawson either. He's too small of a guy, and I think they would just take Jamie Chadwell and hope for the upside if they're going to do that. I don't know. Auburn's such a tricky place, like you said. We're just listing off top-tier candidates because that's what Auburn's going to go big game hunt for. So that's one thing I'm looking to see because they have to satisfy a bunch of fans and boosters because they're right there at Alabama competing with Alabama, and it's tough. It's tough when you're going against Saban like that. You get fired a lot, and you have a lot of issues. That's what happens.
Yeah, the one name that I like that you said that's not that a big of a name is Todd Monken. I didn't think about Todd Monken there. I thought about him at Arizona State. I like the idea of Todd Monken as a lower guy, but I'm telling you, man, when it comes to Auburn, the names that you need to be listening out for are Deion Sanders, Urban Meyer, and Matt Rule. They want big name guys. I'm telling you, those are the three guys that they are calling before they call anyone else. That is who I believe they want. And we'll see what happens from there. Let's wrap this up with some Jimbo talk here, man. Jimbo Fisher, he got off the schneid. He got a win against Miami. It was a huge win. That program would have burnt down if they lost to Miami. It was ugly, but they won. All right? They won. Congrats to them. Their defense was great. The offense did just enough, and they won. To be honest with you, a lot of people are hating on Miami's offense. I actually was kind of impressed with Miami's offense. They had more yards. They had more first down. They just couldn't score a damn touchdown. Those receivers let Tyler Van Dyke down so hard. Trust me, Tyler Van Dyke did not play a great game. I understand that. But the receivers didn't help him out at all when it came to that game. In terms of Jimbo, this is my issue with him, Sean. He has never adapted. He's clearly never going to adapt. And I don't get it with him, man. He acts like he runs an offense where you don't have the personnel, so you have to run this style offense. It's like what the App States of the world, no disrespect to them, but they have a certain personnel that they get where they have to run this style of offense. The smaller schools have to run this style of offense. Texas A&M gets anybody they want. They can run whatever offense they want to run. Georgia has adapted. Alabama has adapted. Jimbo can't adapt. He is running off a 1980s offense, and until he wakes the hell up and changes, they're going to always be a disappointment. And I'll just say one more thing to Texas A&M fans. That recruiting class is not locked in. They've got the guys, but it's not locked in. If they lose a couple more games, watch out.
Yeah, I agree because the offense that you're mentioning, it worked well when you had Jameis back there slinging it,
Yeah.
and you had Freeman back in the backfield and all that. That offense works well when you got the pieces like that. And in theory, they should have the pieces. But you know what's happened? We've moved on in time. It's been about 8-10 years.
Yeah.
We've moved on. It's time to change up the offense, get some motion flowing, and really run a modernized college football offense with all these recruits you have. Because the truth is, I'm reading scouting write-ups and stuff, and I'm watching a lot of Texas A&M because they do have a lot of NFL talent. They're going to get drafted a ton of people. The same thing is it's said by a bunch of scouts, a bunch of people watching. They play like mercenaries. They don't play as a team. They don't play within a scheme. They play like a bunch of mercenaries. This corner's doing this. This safety's freelancing here. And it's getting them killed on defense, but it's also getting them killed on offense. Now that they've actually put Max Johnson in, they seem to be better. I think it's time for Wegman, to be honest. I don't like
Yes.
Max Johnson or Haynes King at this point. Really, I don't know why you just don't play your most talented guy,
Why
especially
not?
if you've already lost a game. Just put him in there. Really, what's the harm of that? But the thing about A&M is they're going to put a lot of dudes in the league, and they might get drafted in the second or third round when they should be in the first because they're not playing as a cohesive unit, and that's all on coaching, in my opinion.
Yes.
That's all on coaching. You're going to see some people like Jalen Johnson at corner. He might fall a little bit. Dude's as physically gifted as you could come, and he might fall a little bit in the draft. He might be a steal. You're going to see people like A-Chain and Anaya Smith. They're going to explode in the NFL, and you're going to be like, how did Texas A&M not win more games? And it's because the offense is prehistoric, and he's not putting these speedsters and these athletes in a good place to succeed. Jimbo's got to change it up a little bit. I know me and you probably harp on that. Jimbo needs to change his offense up as much as Dabo needs to change his transfer portal theories up.
Yes, that's
These
a great
two are
point.
living in the past. It hasn't caught up to Dabo yet because his recruits are so good and they do play so well coached. But Jimbo, this offense is catching up to him. And until he realizes that, he's always going to underachieve. And it's sad because I actually like Texas A&M a ton as a school, even though a lot of people say it's cult-like and everything. I actually like them as a school.
I think their culture is
a lot
cool.
of their players. I think they're all going to – I think a lot of these players are going to be big-time NFL players, and you're going to look back and be like, how did they underperform so much in the league? And it's going to be because of the scheme that Jimbo runs.
No doubt. I mean, look, people make fun of Texas A&M. That's what college football is all about. It's a different culture. I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool. It's different, but that's what college football is all about. But the best thing you said there is the word prehistoric. That's what it is. Their offense is prehistoric, and it's going to cost them. And Dan Mullen said it on the halftime show. He called out Jimbo. He said, get the damn wide receivers the ball. Get the playmakers the ball. Let them do things. He can't do it because of the offense they run. And listen, man, Arkansas comes to town on Saturday. It's at Texas A&M, lucky for them. KJ Jefferson and that offense can put up points. Can Texas A&M score with them? That's the question we're going to have to watch and see. But Jimbo has got to win some very big games down the road here. Otherwise, this season could fall apart big time.
Oh, yeah, let me just speak on Jimbo one more time. If I see y'all slam A-Chain up the middle when he needs to be getting pitched outside, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, honestly. Pitch the man outside every run play almost. He's going to get to the edge and beat everybody. It drives me insane watching that. Slam him up the middle every time like he's freaking Braylon Allen. Just let him run outside.
It's the thing he's been doing for years and years and years. And you said it. He had Jameis to make up for it. When you don't have a Jameis, it's clear as day that you need a change there, and it's not happening right away. All right, that is all for the Money Down Pod. Great show there. That is Sean White at Dumpster Fire Fan, myself at Kayvon_sports. Really fun. We gave out a lot of names there. Me and Sean are we itch for this type of content. We love coaching searches. I love it. Sean loves it. It's really fun. And again, you heard it here first. Shadeur Sanders and Deion, could they be on the move? If not, watch out for Shadeur in the NFL, as we talked about here. We'll talk about them much more. We'll talk about Auburn much more, and we'll break down as we go. Check out our NFL video that just went up today, breaking down everything that happened in week 2. If you haven't yet, we'll talk to you later this week.